Well, we're continuing the journey this morning around why stuff happens. If you were here last week, if you tuned in last week, we began this journey of thinking about why does things happen? Why does stuff happen? Why are bad things going on in our world? And last week we began by talking about how the blame game. Blame is the first evidence of our fallen nature. The very first thing that happened in the garden was to blame. And so we're saying we don't want to go, because we don't want to move into that space of blame, or because when we're blaming, we're not taking ownership. And the key in the midst of stuff that's going on is to firstly take ownership. Have a look at my place in this. And last week we said that when it comes to things that are going on around about us, the stuff that's happening, we will always reap what we sow. It's the law of sowing and reaping. It's cause and effect, action and reaction, and so the reality for every one of us in this room, we're all planting seed, whether you're a gardener or not. Every day, from the moment you wake up, we are planting seed. We are planting. The seed is our words, our actions, and our reactions. So we wake up, as soon as we open our mouth, as soon as we start doing stuff, we are planting. We're planting seed. And the thing with seed is that it will grow and it will produce crops. It will produce a harvest. Our words, our actions, our reactions today are a seed that we plant which will produce a harvest of consequences tomorrow. We are continually living in the consequences of our words, our actions, and reactions. So if we don't like the crops, if we don't like the harvest, we stop planting the seed. When I was growing up, when I was younger, there's two things I did not like, was Brussels sprouts and broad beans. Now, if you've got your little garden patch, if you don't like broccoli, well, you don't plant the seed, right? You only plant in the garden that you are looking forward to enjoy the stuff. So if we don't like the seed in that respect, well, it's the same in life. If we don't like the consequences we're living in, we've got to trace our steps back to our words, our actions, our reactions, identify the seed, and stop planting it. Stop planting it. And that requires ownership, recognizing that I've got a part to play in this. And so the application from last week was starting a never again list. Dumb things that I've done that I will never do again, because if I do them, these are the consequences, And so start a never again list. Whether some of you that might be mentally, others, if you're like me, you've got to write it down, because otherwise I'll go around that same mountain again, and I think, I've done it again. So start a list, write stuff down because you don't want to live in those crops, the harvest, the consequences. When I was younger, I've got a pretty good record in terms of speeding tickets. It means I don't have many. I'm not saying I've got lots of them. No, when I was younger and driving, I remember I got my first speeding ticket. And the sting of having to just throw that money away caused me to say, I will never do that again. And people call me a Sunday driver. If you're in the car, I wish this guy would just go a bit quicker. But I don't want to just throw my money away. So I put it on the list. I will stick to the speed limit because I don't want to live with the consequences. Myself and Susan, we're in our 25th year of marriage. And out of 24 and a half years of marriage, I've only had to sleep on the couch once. That's a pretty good record as well. And, and I remember that day, I remember it clearly. Leaving, she's like, away you go. I'm like, here I go, sad face, dragging my feet. But I didn't, as I lay on the couch having a little pity party, I didn't start blaming the devil. Man, the devil is having a go at our marriage. He wants to bring marriages down. I didn't start praying against. No, I knew exactly what I'd done. My words, my actions. And so what do? I say, I'm never going to go there again, because I like being close to Susan at night time. Oh, hang on, family show. But I don't want that kind of stuff in the marriage, so I will not go there again. Never again list. Important to have one. So the first thing we're saying is, why does stuff happen in our life? It's because we will always reap what we sow. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. We're continually living in the consequences of our words, our actions, and our reactions. So we're going to move on this morning and think about what else? Why? What are the other reasons for stuff that happens in our world? So I want us to go to Romans chapter 8, from verse 19. And this is what it says. You can see it there on the screen. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. The creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to this present time. So Paul in this passage, he's talking a lot about creation. And if we were to go back to Genesis, if we think about the creation story, we know that God went through the process of creating the entire universe. Everything was created. And after God finished creating, it's like he took a step back and he looked at everything he'd made. And do you know what his response was? In Genesis 1:31, it says that God looked at everything and he said, "This is very good." He looked at everything from the smallest little microplasma thing to the largest supernova. Everything. And he said, "This is very good." In fact, the Hebrew, the word very, it means exceedingly abundantly good. So God is impressed. He's looking at his work and he's thinking, man, this is exceedingly abundantly good. But that's a different picture to what we see here in this passage on the screen. It talks about things like, creation is frustrated. Creation is in bondage to decay. Creation is groaning. So it's like, here we have this picture of God saying this is exceedingly abundantly good, but now frustration, bondage to decay, groaning creation. It's a different picture. As we see, the passage paints a different picture. Let's go to that. It says, creation frustrated. What does a frustrated creation look like? What is a creation in bondage to decay? A creation groaning. Well, the thing that happened between God's exceedingly abundantly good and creation groaning was the fall. See, a key thing to understand is that the fall didn't just affect humanity. When sin entered the world, it didn't just affect humanity. The entire created order was subjected to frustration because of the fall. So what we're saying this morning is that number two, if we're thinking about the second reason, why does stuff happen in our world today? Well, number two is this: creation is groaning. Creation is groaning. Creation is frustrating. There is like this, ever since the fall, there's this inherent agitation in creation. It's like there's instability, things are unsettled. And when we look at creation, we think, wow, we go out and amongst creation, we think this is good. Well, here's the reality. It's not as good as it was. Yeah, God's creation is amazing. We can see how wonderful and beautiful it is. But the reality was, before the fall, it was even better. It was exceedingly abundantly good. But the fall has brought this inherent agitation to all of creation, and creation is groaning. So what does a groaning creation look like? Well, it's natural disasters. We see in our world today, this hurricane that has made landfall on the United States. Hurricanes, natural disasters. There's flooding, there's landslides, there's earthquakes, all those things. Even the fires that are burning. Lightning strikes in California, and we've got these fires. It's a groaning creation. That's the reason. A lot of the stuff that goes on in our world is because there is this inherent agitation that creation is frustrated. It's good, but it's been tainted and deprived because of sin. There is hope in the passage. Verse 21, it speaks of this hope, this longing, that creation itself is longing to be free, to be liberated from the bondage to decay. And so it's like even creation, Like when we think of the gospel, we think of what Jesus achieved on Calvary. It wasn't just about, he didn't just make a way for the salvation of souls, but through Calvary, Jesus has made a way for all of creation to be redeemed and restored. This is important because sometimes I think we have a truncated gospel. We've reduced the gospel to merely the saving of souls, and it is that, but it's so much more. The gospel is about the restoration of all of creation to that place of being exceedingly abundantly good. Creation is longing to be liberated, to be like creation has got its eye on that time when it's going to be restored to how things were before the fall. And it's important to keep that in mind when we think of the gospel, that thing. There's going to come a day when all of creation will be redeemed and restored. But for now, things happen around us in the world that are beyond our control because we're saying that creation is groaning. We live in a fallen world. So what can we do? What can you and I do? What is my part, in a sense, in the midst of this agitated creation? Things are unsettled. Verse 19 helps me. And this is really interesting. If we look at verse 19, it says, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed." That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Creation is waiting eagerly for the children of God to be revealed. One translation, I can't remember which one, but it said that creation is on tiptoes with that expectation, anticipation of the children of God to be revealed. Creation is longing in the midst of all that's going on, and in the midst of this groaning and frustration and bondage to decay. Creation is looking for the children of God, longing for them to take a stand. Why? Because the original mandate for God's children was to care for creation. The original mandate, when God set humanity on earth and said, "This is your home," the first thing he said to them was, "I want you to work with creation and care for creation." That was our first mandate as children of God. And so there's a sense of, creation is longing for the children of God to lead the way with us. I believe with all my heart that in terms of caring for creation and looking after the environment, it should be the church leading the way with that stuff. We shouldn't be looking for other groups, like the church. We should be standing up, as it says, the children of God standing up and caring for what God has entrusted us with, the creation. Now, I wrote this down. When we neglect our mandate to care, we put salt in the wound of a creation that is already hurting and groaning as a result of the fall. When we neglect our mandate to care, we put salt in the wound of a creation that is already hurting and groaning. Some of the choices we make, some of the things humanity does, aggravates the groaning. Some of the natural disasters wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the way we treat the planet. The church, the children of God should be leading the way with caring for creation. So there's many ways we can do that. Like if you want application, like I was having a chat to Brooke Carpenter through the week and talking to some people, and there's many, many different things. And I'm not here to give you a lesson on the environment. If you want to know what you can do, Google it, go home. There's much more qualified people who can talk about that. But what I'm saying is if the church, here's my heart, if we really want to win with young people, if we really want to win with the younger generations, then we've got to start leading the way with caring for the planet, caring for God's creation. I was involved in Bible in schools, and a few years ago now, and I had half an hour in a week to go in and speak to these 11 and 12-year-olds. And, they're not really interested. They weren't interested in the Bible. This was just a free half hour. Let's see how we can heckle this guy. And they weren't really that interested in Bible stories. But I tell you what, the moment when they were most interested or most engaged was the moment I talked about how God created the universe and he wants us to care for his creation. All of a sudden, they're engaged. And they gave me all these ideas, things to do, how can we care, what can we do? The generations coming through are passionate about caring. And, they're looking around, it's almost like, we talk about not playing the blame game. Well, I want to tell you, the generations coming through, they blame my generation and older for the state of the planet. And we've got to take some ownership for that. But we can change. We can lead the way. And I tell you, this will connect with the younger generations when the church starts being the children of God that creation is longing to see stand up and be revealed in the midst of the groaning, the frustration that is going on. There was this quote that came out back when we were all in lockdown and much of the world was in lockdown. Well, much of the world still is in lockdown, but the early days of lockdown, there was this quote which got my attention. It said this: "We can't go back to normal because normal was the problem." And speaking in the context of creation. As we were in lockdown, all of a sudden there was this positive impact on the environment. Cities that were affected by heavy pollution were seeing blue skies for the first time in years. Rivers and streams that were murky and dirty were now flowing clear and clean. People living next to busy freeways, waking up in the morning to all this traffic noise, were now waking up to the sound of birds singing and nature. And Francis Chan, who some of you will know, he lives in Hong Kong, and he said this: "Nature has been revived. The air is better to breathe. The birds are singing with such joy. Wild animals are free to roam without the danger of becoming roadkill." And so I think, one of the things we're saying, there is a lot of going on in our world that is beyond our control. It's because creation is groaning. But what can we do as God's church, as his children, to actually partner with creation, work with creation and care for his creation? And so that's kind of the takeaway question this morning, is saying, well, what can I do? If it's creation, as the verse said, is longing for the children of God to be revealed, well, I'm going to be God's child. I'm going to stand up in the midst of all that's going on, and I'm going to do my very best to care for what God's entrusted to me to care for. So we're saying today that why things happen. Two possibilities. Number one is that we will always reap what we sow. We're continually living in the consequences for our words, our actions, our reactions. The second thing we're saying is why is stuff happening is because creation is groaning. We live in a fallen world, but we can alleviate the groaning by caring. We can calm the agitation by caring for creation. Oh, there's a bit of a rhyme for you. We can calm the agitation by caring for creation. And we can all play a part in that. There is more to talk about this, and I want to share, like we've got Father's Day next Sunday, but the Sunday after Father's Day, we'll go for part 3, which will be, why stuff happens. Because I think it's important to understand, particularly with all that's going on and affecting us. In Romans 1, it paints a very clear picture. Paul says that when we look at creation, anybody, they are without excuse that God is real. Paul makes that very clear. All you got to do is open the curtains or step out into creation, and when you look at God's creation, no one has an excuse to say that God is not real. Creation points to God. And this is the thing that baffles me. We love creation. It's amazing. But imagine how good it would have been before the fall. If it's good now, when God steps back and says something is exceedingly abundantly good, it's got to be amazing. So it would have been incredible. But we still see, as we look at creation, that there is a God, there is an author, there is an artist, a creator behind it. No one is without excuse. I want us to take a few moments as we finish just to worship the Creator. And one of the things that we've found, I've found, and maybe others have found, as you read the scriptures, if you read God's word, what you'll see is that when people are going through difficulties, when there's hardship, when the pressure is on, again and again and again, you find God's people are worshipping. They're, even though it seems like a dumb thing to do, why would you be praising God? Why would you be worshipping Him? Why would you be celebrating God when all this is going wrong? It just doesn't seem like the natural thing to do would be to complain, wouldn't it? Or to, blame. But in the midst of things that go on in our world that are beyond our control, the best thing we can do is to declare our God holy, is to worship Him, is to celebrate His goodness, is to remind ourselves where we stand, our position, that we stand on the rock, that we stand on Jesus, who is unmovable, unshakable, even when everything else is moving around us. When there's uncertainty, we stand on the one who is eternal, immovable, unshakable, and His name is Jesus.
There's a river flowing from the mountains that shows our God is true. There's a song rising from the valleys. It's our response to you. You are God, God of all creation. The earth groans, longs to be with you. And where we are, our hearts are raised to heaven. We breathe to worship you. We stand in awe, our faces shine with wonder, made pure by perfect blood. What better way to give you all the honors than to bow before the one? You are God, God of all creation. The earth grows and longs to be with you. Where we are, our hearts are raised to heaven. We breathe to worship you. You are God, God of all creation. The earth grows and longs to be with you. Where we are, our hearts are raised to heaven. We breathe to worship you. In the stillness, I can hear you whisper, calling deep and deeper still. The same voice that moved upon the waters says, "Come drink and have your fill." In the stillness, I can hear you whisper, The same voice that moved upon the waters says, come drink and have your fill. Says, come drink.